Can I have your attention? I'd like to make an announcement or a little plug for the fall called Women in Transition. We did get in the schedule, we did get the addendum, and it landed on the lone screen on the registration. And therefore, not too many people know that that course is being offered, and it's not too late to schedule it in. The class itself focuses on women going through changes and practical science psychology and learning new tools to cope in the kinds of changes a woman is going through. I co-teach that class, and the emphasis is on body work, meditation, yoga, gestalt, learning a variety of new tools.
Traditionally, a troubadour is one who wanders, singing songs and writing complicated lyrical poems. Today, however, despite what some people may say, I have a very uncomplicated and I think beautiful story of two people who happen to fall in love. The best way I know of introducing you to Beth and Alice is to give you a touch of their essence. Woman, you know that I need you. Reach across my mind and speak to me. This feeling inside makes me want you. The sadness holds me back 'cause we're not free. Silent lover, you have smothered all the painful fears inside of me. And in time we might find, though we can't escape the times, that we'll always love each other tenderly. Sister, I know we were both scared, but the rapture of the evening made us see. Love gave to us what we now share, and the memory of your eyes is all I need. Silent lover, you have smothered all the painful fears inside of me. the video. Okay? Are you all too warm? Just right? I have to tell you a funny story. When we were in Bellingham this last month, I was nervous because Lynn, who usually takes care of my outfit and makes sure I've done the correct things, like remember to put my makeup out on the table and things like that, wasn't with me because she was sick. And I was very nervous because I'd never had to think of all the little things all by myself. So for some reason, the one responsibility that stuck in my mind was the heating system in the theater. And I remembered that if you didn't shut off the heating system, that when you were out on stage, the fan would be going so loud that no one could hear me. So the first thing I did when I arrived to the theater was run in and shut off the heat. And when the house lights came on after the play, everyone in the audience was sitting out there going like this. So, well, let's see. Beth and Alice were in school when they met, and neither suspected that an afternoon in the cafeteria would one day change the direction of their entire lives. Alice especially had no idea that any changes would come in the near future or ever for that matter. She was very comfortable living her life in the prescribed American manner. Boyfriends with good backgrounds, a sweet and compatible roommate, and of course, just a hint of mascara. She had no reason to believe that her life would entail anything other than meeting the right man, settling down, and having a family. You've heard it all before, I'm sure. But destiny had its own plans. "Hello," said a voice. "My name is Beth. Mind if I sit down?" Alice looked up to see the most incredibly beautiful face she had ever seen. There was something in that gaze. She found herself staring and then caught herself. No, please, sit down." Now, this woman was really beautiful. There was a peacefulness from within that made her very thankful for such company. And as it turned out, 2 hours over coffee and sandwiches was enough to discover that the feeling was quite mutual. I think it was Beth who claimed that it was a disarming smile that caused her to extend a dinner invitation. There are also those who maintain that by breakfast time the next morning, these two were already hopelessly in love. But be as that may, it did become apparent after several weeks that a special bond had been formed. Alice lost interest in her boyfriends, and Beth lost interest in everything but Alice. Now, some people could easily become confused over such a situation. But Alice summed it up in her own quiet way by saying, "I've been taught all my life that love is a good thing. There's nothing to be afraid of. I love you." So, instead of confusion, there was a kind of strength that grew in their relationship until they found that they needed such a relationship, found that they needed that strength. Now, love, being such a rare commodity these days, deserves to be celebrated when it blossoms. At least this was the conclusion reached by Alice's roommate when she found a note Beth had written to Alice. "Woman, my woman, thou art magic." In fact, she got so excited that she quickly ran down the hall and told everybody in the dorm about it. They got so excited, they too wanted to have a celebration. After all, some of them had known Alice for 2 years or more. They'd been best friends. This was special news. Only I think the word they used was evidence. So one night, when Alice came home from having had dinner with Beth, she opened the door to her room and reached for the light, and they grabbed her, and they gagged her, and they tied her up, and they dragged her to her bed, and they shaved every hair off her head. This didn't devastate them. It hurt them, but it didn't devastate them. They realized after that because of their love, they would be the only two people they could count on to take care of each other. They ended up leaving school and getting a house. And after a while, Alice's hair grew back and most of the shock faded. For a year, they lived in peace and thought little of the outside society. It wasn't until Beth read one particular Sunday paper that the shadows of new directions were to come again. There on the front page, the headlines read, 3,000 homosexuals march through the streets of New York. Beth looked at that, thought a moment, and yelled, "Honey, honey, look! There are more than two of us in this world." Now, the article concerned itself with something called the Christopher Street Day Parade and the Stonewall riots. It seems that the police tried to raid a tavern called Stonewall. I believe the year was 1969. And this had touched off 3 days of rioting. And now, according to the newspaper, people all over the country were celebrating in honor of the fact that this was the first time in history that gay people had ever responded to this violence, responded to the raids, the beatings, what they said was the inhuman treatment. And Beth suddenly found herself thinking about the riot she wished she could have caused the night Alice showed up on her doorstep and removed the scarf from her head. But in looking into Alice's eyes and seeing the reflection of that horror again, she quickly allowed the thought to pass and gave Alice a hug. One idea did remain with them, though. If there are 3,000 gay people, and that's what the newspaper said, 3,000 gay people in New York, how many might there be in their own hometown? Oh, they'd thought about gay bars before, but had concluded that they were respectable lesbians. They had heard what went on in those places. Now, however, the idea sounded a little more inviting. And it was Alice who helped them decide when she thought aloud about how wonderful the privilege of dancing with one's own lover could be. Much to their surprise, it didn't take them long to find a place. And what surprised them even further was that everyone in the tavern looked like a normal human being. Even the beer tasted the same. There was one difference. A certain kind of unexplainable warmth. Perhaps it was the fact that they could sit and look at each other and maybe even hold hands for as long as they wanted without having to worry about someone snickering or making a crack. For whatever the reasons, they liked it. And friends were very easy to make among such pleasant people. And one in particular was a teacher in her early 30s who told them how she had lost her job. It seems some teachers were indulging in some merriment one afternoon that made lesbians the brunt of their humor. And when she told them she didn't especially care for that type of joke, they asked her if she was a lesbian, and when she answered yes, she was, she got fired. 17 years of a good, productive teaching career down the drain. She didn't let them off easily, however. She turned out to be quite a fighter. She took the whole school system to court. Now, it lasted 2 years, but the judge finally had to admit that she had indeed been fired illegally. He refused to have her reinstated, however, on the grounds that, quote, he himself wouldn't want such a person teaching his children, unquote. Now, at that point, she looked that judge straight in the eye and told him how very illogical his entire line of reasoning had been. She had been fired for being a practicing homosexual, and this was absolutely and totally ridiculous, she said, because she doesn't need any practice. They didn't exactly appreciate her form of humor either. Alice and Beth were to hear many stories like this, and each time it was to put them in the midst of a dilemma. It took so much courage for a lesbian woman or a gay man to stand up and speak for their rights. If you did, you lost everything. But if you didn't, you lost your own self-respect. Have you ever noticed that dilemmas often have a way of solving themselves? A family gathering of Alice's relatives at Thanksgiving was to offer this opportunity. It was time to meet the in-laws. Now, the evening began quite gracefully. The dinner was delicious and the conversation was enjoyable. There was one stiff moment when Aunt Martha tried to play Cupid with a cousin named Jack and Beth. She leaned over to Alice and said, "Alice, darling, your roommate is lovely, and Jack is just the handsome man a young lady like that needs." A quick change of subject and all was forgotten. It wasn't until the after-dinner cocktails that the trouble began. Someone started telling jokes, and one led to another, and then it finally happened. The queer joke surfaced. And it's amazing, the abundance of these jokes. Once they get started, everybody has to know at least one. And Alice and Beth sat very quietly while they were being humiliated until Beth did a very unexpected thing. Suddenly, she took a deep breath and said, "You know something? By the way you people talk here this evening, one could get the impression that you don't like homosexual people very much." Alice got up to get the coats as Cousin Jack poked Beth in the ribs. "What's the matter, Beth, dear? You queer?" To which Beth replied, "Oh, no, I'm not queer. Why, I'm a happy, healthy, normal lesbian woman. I'm not odd at all." Actually, it all worked out for the best. They never had to put in an appearance at the family gatherings again. And in the long run, had much more time for each other. And what was really interesting was the fact that instead of embarrassment over Thanksgiving's festivities, Alice and Beth often found themselves breaking into hysterical laughter each time they thought of the looks on the faces of those relatives. Beth's outburst seemed to give them a new perspective. Alice thought her lover very brave to have said what she did, but as Beth put it, you don't have to have courage to fight your way out of a plastic bag. It's a matter of emotional and spiritual survival. You either speak or you suffocate. It was this new perspective that caused them to join what was known then as community support groups. And it was in these support groups that they met two lesbian women who had 6 children between the two of them. And many years of court battles had put the right of these women to have the kind of family they wanted on the line. And all because they happened to commit the crime of falling in love. Boy, that love stuff, you got to nip that right in the bud. And many doctors and lawyers and, of course, their ex-husbands had tried to prove these two to be unfit mothers. But what was interesting about this was that even though many women all across the country had lost similar cases, these two proved to be good mothers, were able to keep their children, and eventually, after a second court battle, won the privilege of living together. Now, neither Beth nor Alice considered themselves knowledgeable enough to be political. But it did help to sit and talk with other people who had the same problems and share all the fears and misgivings of living in a society that hates you. And for some reason, the attachments that they formed with these two women in particular made them feel as if they had won something too. Pride can be a very good catalyst for action. Alice and Beth were to find that rage could be even greater inspiration. They discovered this one afternoon when a lesbian friend was stopped for what the police said was speeding in her car. For some reason, 4 officers found it necessary to pull her from the car with such force that they broke her arm. And then they grabbed her by her hair and bashed her head against the car until she lost consciousness. And when she fell to the ground, they kicked her until they broke her ribs and burst her bladder. When she took them to court, she lost for resisting arrest. It was strange, I think, for 2 young college-age people who had no aspirations other than just to make a life for themselves. I think it must have been strange for them to find themselves on their first picket line. Never did they expect to see so many people out in front of that police station. There were people there of all color, creed, and kind, women and men, who had all felt that same sense of injustice. And one surprise of the day was meeting the clergy members of churches which had formed specifically for the benefit of gay people. Now, Beth didn't, and Alice certainly did not have an allegiance to organized religion, but they found this an interesting growth within the movement, a kind of broadening of its perspectives. And it was out of supportive principles that they accepted an invitation to services the next day in a show of solidarity. It's funny sometimes how turning points come when you least expect them. And the next day, when they arrived for services, they found a smoldering pile of rubble. It seems some good citizens in the neighborhood had decided to burn the building in order to keep the queers from praying. Perhaps they feared the Creator would switch sides. That afternoon, 1,000 individuals knelt in the ashes in the street, and they prayed anyway. And it was during services that Beth got, what would you say, an inspiration? If she just had a chance to just talk to people, perhaps things could change at least a little for the better. Anything had to be better than just sitting by and dealing over and over again with these acts of hate, mistrust, and violence. Alice was more than a little uneasy at Beth's idea of a speaking to her, because she knew that it would take her lover far away and for weeks at a time, not to mention the danger involved. But she knew that Beth was right and tried very hard not to cry and not to show her worry that first day they said goodbye. After all, the distance seemed to initiate a new spark of romance. Beth wrote really lovely letters to quiet that loneliness, and it even seemed to bring out the creative element in Beth. She began writing short songs, sending them to Alice. And Alice often found herself sitting in the evening, smiling to herself as she thought of that first day they'd met. And once in a while, she'd hum one of these tunes to herself. When you wake up in the morning and you're searching for my eyes, I've already thought of mountains of the memories deep inside. And remember, my sweet darling, though my journey be so long, I'll be back again someday, dear, with a golden gilded song. Gilded song, gilded song, gilded song, gilded song. And while I'm gone, my darling, I ask that you pray for me each precious day, while I whisper jeweled letters that for me will try to say. How I love you, my After that, I decided that taking care of a house while Beth was away was really no way to make a home. Home would have to be whatever time, whatever space we shared together. Traveling was very, very tiring, and oftentimes extremely frustrating. As Beth became better and better known for her speaking, it became increasingly difficult for us to stay in any one place for very long. As soon as the landlords learned of our relationship, we were asked to leave. One summer we had to move 9 times. This wasn't as bad as some of the threats. Once when Beth was speaking at a rally I guess there were several hundred people. A man up front in the audience reached into his coat pocket, and before anybody could stop him, he pulled out a gun, aimed straight at Beth's head, and fired. It missed her by inches. I remember just being sick, holding my breath, hoping. You know what she did? She stood up to the microphone and kept right on talking. She just kept right on talking. She just delivered her speech as if nothing had even happened. That woman really had ovaries. Not all of it was bad. Not all of it was difficult. Sometimes it could be very exciting. Like the year we were invited to New Orleans. There was a gay pride celebration going on there. There's been a week of celebration all across the country, and Beth had been asked to come and speak. I was very excited to think about all the people we might meet. And the first thing I made her do was take me to the marketplace. We never had much money, but I thought it would just be nice to just spend all day looking at the shops and dreaming. And that afternoon she had two very special surprises. She bought me a jewelry box, and she had gone to a second-hand store and purchased two very worn and very tattered tuxedos. She said to me, "Honey, when we go to the dance tonight, we have to look official. And everybody knows that the true and scientific way of knowing whether or not a woman is a lesbian is discovering that she harbors a secret desire to wear a bow tie." Well, being a woman of science, I couldn't argue with that. It took me a good 2 hours to learn how to tie a bow tie. I remember being so excited, and while we were getting dressed and trying to tie those darn ties, I remember Beth humming another one of those little tunes. Lavender crystal kisses are what I'm waiting for, and a wonderful green-eyed babe will bring them right through my front door. And I'm waiting for the day when I can know we'll always be says will be what set us free. Now if you find that you just can't make it, remember this little song. And if you have joy, don't break it. Just celebrate it all day long. And when people laugh at your loving, 'cause they don't understand our ways, you just smile and hope that they're happy and blow a kiss their way. And when people laugh at your loving, 'cause they don't understand our ways, you just smile and hope that they're happy and blow a kiss their way. When we arrived at the tavern, I could see that someone had spent all day putting banners and colored streamers on the walls and the ceiling. It was beautiful. But the costumes were the real show. There were big, massive hoop skirts, hair piled to the ceiling, sequined eyeshadow, loop earrings. The women also wore a variety of costumes. Some wore suits and some wore beautiful dresses. And as people walked through the door, they'd smile and wave, and if you stood close enough, sometimes you even got a hug, even if we'd never met. And each time the music began, Beth would smile at me and I'd smile at her. And round we'd go. You know how sometimes you can feel it in the air. Finally, I got winded and moved towards the bar to get a glass of beer. And that's when I spotted those two men. The look of surprise on their faces is what gave them away. And I knew they weren't gay when one of them looked at the other out of the corner of his eye and said, "Hey, look at here. Look at all the weirdos." They got increasingly louder and increasingly impolite, and one of the bartenders asked them to leave. At first they protested, and we all breathed a sigh of relief when they finally turned to leave. It was so nice for once, just for once, not to have to put up with that kind of rudeness. Just for once to have an evening that was ours. We had no idea. Stood there for a while, chatting and drinking, and then I smelled a strong odor drift through the room. It seemed to be coming from the door area. And as I looked around, it didn't seem that anyone else noticed there was so much dancing and talking going on, except for one young man standing near the door who also seemed to be concerned with where and what the odor was. It was so strong. I moved in his direction. I reached for the door handle and it was stuck. I thought that was sort of strange, being the main door. I gave it a tug, so he moved to help me. We had no idea. We gave it another tug. And before I knew it, a force had blown me several feet backwards onto the floor. People started screaming and running. The whole ceiling caught fire. In moments, it was just seconds, really. As the room was filled with smoke, the confusion made it hard to think. Where's Beth? And then she was just there, tugging on my arm, pulling me towards this window with a bar on it. The bars. The burglar bars on the window. I couldn't see a fire escape. My head hurt. My eyes were stinging. I didn't know. And then she was shoving me, pushing me through these bars. Shoving me, making me fit between them. And when I hit the ground, I turned around just in time to see her burst into flames. I was so sick. And there was a man standing next to me who started screaming, my God, my friend is in there. And we couldn't stop him. He went running into the building. One of the firemen tried to stop him, but he knocked him down, and he went running into that building. Now I know that the reason that man ran into that building was not so that he could have sex with his partner. And I don't understand why that's so hard for some people to understand. The next morning was awful. We had to go and find people. One of these days, one of these days, maybe, it will all make sense. Maybe. We're all different. We're all different, so what? Can't we agree to disagree? When you wake up in the morning and you're searching for my eyes, I've already bought the mountain. It's been kind of in a tradition to talk a little bit afterwards, but we're running late today. And so those of you who wish to, we have a small book here. Lynn has it. Yeah, and maybe we could file out this door over here, and maybe you can just write your thoughts in there for me. And those of you who would like to stay and talk, perhaps we can do that in this little room over here. God bless you.